Hey everyone, it's Sevy, and I'm back with another Spiral Abyss video. I usually do my Abyss guides using 4-star teams and equipment, but I've seen a couple of requests for me to use teams without any self-imposed restrictions. So in this video, I revisited and recorded some of my Floor 12 Abyss retries using my personal favorite teams, basically how I would do it normally. To start, I'll be using teams with the featured 5 stars, Nahida and Nilou, as we know that Hoyo generally designs their Abyss cycles to play to its current limited banner character strengths. The second half should be particularly good for Nilou, since the chambers all feature enemy mobs that generally get grouped together, which will play to her Bloom's AoE potential very well. I'll be showing them as a complete run, and then afterwards, my other chosen teams. Let's dive in! We're gonna start with a Nahida, Raiden, Yelan, Xingqiu, Hyperbloom team. There's only one unit here with a 5-star weapon, and that's Yelan with an Aqua Simulacra. Now this is a relatively brain-dead team with of course an EM-built Raiden to trigger those Hyperblooms, and Yelan and Xingqiu double Hydro for that high single target damage. Moving on to the Consecrated Beasts. Now, you might have noticed that I don't actually have a healer on this team. What I did was give Nahida Prototype Amber to be the team quote-unquote healer. So Nahida and Prototype Amber plus Xingqiu's Rain Swords, which give damage reduction and interruption resistance, are doing a pretty good job of keeping my team alive. Although, if you are looking for more comfort or an actual reliable healer, then you can take out Yelan and bring in Yao Yao instead. Another option is of course turning Kuki into your Hyperbloomer so she consolidates that Hyperbloom triggering plus her own healing. For the next half, we have a Nilou Bloom team with Nilou, Kokomi, Dendro MC, and Kole. Only Nilou has a 5-star weapon here, which is the key. The second half of Floor 12 feels really good for the Nilou team in general, and this shouldn't be a surprise since Nilou is a featured banner character right now. Anyway, this first wave of fungi thankfully stayed together and died at the same time. For this next wave, instead of going straight to the Kairagi, I tried to go to the other side to lure them to where the Consecrated Beasts will spawn later on. As long as they stay together, which they did, killing them with Nilou's team is pretty straightforward. Now when it comes to the Consecrated Beasts, Nilou's team performs well, it feels good, but you can still be prone to dying, especially when combining the Consecrated Beast's damage to you and Nilou's bountiful core self-damage, so you really want to be cautious, make sure your healer is reliable, and that you're using them well. It's also quite annoying when the beasts move around so much because this Nilou team is using Circle Impact with Dendro MC, Kokomi, and Kole, but if you're using someone like Nahida, then this will probably be a smaller issue. Moving on to the next chamber. While the Aeon Blight Drake is still waking up, I'm already doing some of my setup so that once it flies, all Yelan has to do is shoot it down and I can dive straight into the Hyperblooming cycle.
Here comes the catch. Shine down!
That high single target damage from the double Hydro plus of course the Hyperblooms, they are really coming through and they're able to defeat this boss before it even rains down bombs.
There is no escape! Rain Cutter!
This may hurt a little.
Shine down!
For the second half, we are starting with the Hilichurl Rogues. Now at the start, I move ahead of the Hilichurl Rogues to try to aggro the farther ones a little bit forward and closer to each other, so that once they're clumped, Nilou's team can easily get through them. As always though, I just had to be careful of not dying with this team.
Let's move on.
Then when the Eremites come out, I just use the same technique of targeting the Archer Eremite first and letting the others move towards me and clump together, so that AoE damage really gets them all.
Testing my patience.
Hold the line. Just like we rehearsed.
Goodbye. But we'll meet again.
Billowing surge.
Unfortunately, this time that Pyro Aramite didn't move towards me as much as I wanted to, so it was kind of just left there and I had to set up again to get rid of it.
Allow me.
The eternal awaits.
And for the final chamber, this one is pretty straightforward against the Asimon. I do my setup, but I do save Xingqiu's and Yelan's bursts for its downtime.
Shine down, Rain Cutter.
Once it was down and I activated everyone's bursts and got the Hyperblooms going, I was able to one-phase it once again.
This may turn a little.
There is no escape. Gotcha. Witness the power.
Finally, we have Nilou's team up against the triple Kenki, and as I said before, Nilou's team feels great here. You just want to make sure you're dodging or iframing their heavy hits, since that can knock you out or one-shot you if you're not careful. Although if you do find yourself needing more healing, then you can easily substitute one of the Denjo units here for Yao Yao. In such cases, you want to make sure that Yao Yao can burst reliably, since it's mostly her burst that can achieve that AoE Denjo application you want for Bloom teams.
Go! Just like we rehearsed. Rest and rebuild. Dance with the waves.
And that's my Nahida and Nilou run done. I already know that Quicken and National teams perform well since I used them in my original Abyss guide, so any upgrades or other variations of those teams will do great too. Next, I'm going to try out my favorite 5-star Quicken teams in the first half. The first Quicken team I've got here is a Keqing Fischl Yao Yao Kazuha Aggravate team. And I actually really like Keqing's playstyle because it's fast-paced, it's snappy, she can do single target, she can do AoE, and I just overall find it exciting. The first wave is taken care of very easily by their combined AoE damage.
By royal Go get him, you
Kazuha is of course here to help buff, group, and also deal aggravate damage by infusing Electro into his burst. Now as always, going up against the Consecrated Beasts is a test of survival, but aside from Yugui, what I'm doing is utilizing a lot of bursts and iframes in order to just get by and try to avoid getting hit in general.
Got lucky that time. Incoming.
Wind Strider. I'll uproot you!
The next Quicken team I really like playing is Tighnari in a spread team, and this team has Tighnari, Fischl, Nahida, and Zhongli. Tighnari is mainly single target, so he was most effective in the second and third chambers, and the first chamber went relatively slow for him, but he still managed. But if you comp him with multi-targeting units like perhaps Yae, that can supplement the lack of AoE damage that Tighnari has. When it comes to the first chamber, Zhongli, or at least a super strong shielder, feels almost necessary because Tighnari can tend to be quite squishy and you want to avoid that interruption so that Tighnari can fire off his shots with no problem. If he gets thrown around too much, you'll lose so much damage or just plain die too quickly.
Stabilize! Midnight Phantasmical!
This may turn a little. Grow! Yeah! Make yourselves at home!
I'm skipping over Tighnari's second chamber because his performance there is very similar to how it looks here in the third chamber against the Asimon. They are single target situations, which Tighnari specializes in. One thing to note about the second and third chamber is that shielding wasn't very necessary because these bosses had predictable attack patterns, they were easier to dodge, and even have downtimes when they're not attacking you at all. So he takes care of the bosses very efficiently. Nahida here is of course adding a bunch of her own spread damage as well, so it comes off as a pretty easy run for the team in general. Keqing also performs really well in these boss floors, with Fischl's single target damage doing a lot.
Speed of light. Cut to the chase. Got lucky that time. Incoming.
Moving on to the next team, and this is for the second half. I'm showcasing an all 5-star freeze team of Ayaka, Kokomi, Shenhe, and Kazuha, so this is kind of like your peak freeze team. This freeze team, of course complemented by Kazuha, a really strong crowd controller, is able to just collect those fungi so efficiently and shred through them with Ayaka's burst.
Take flight.
Wind strike.
Hold the line.
Manifest.
Do your master's
Permafreeze also worked really well against those very annoying Kairagi. It becomes a lot easier to control their HP and reduce the chances of them self-healing.
My apologies. Rest and rebound.
And even for the Consecrated Beasts, as long as you keep up that Hydro and Cryo application, they can stay frozen for the most part. You of course do not need Shenhe to make this team good. You can swap in Rosaria or another Cryo DPS or Sub DPS. It's honestly so satisfying to me to see these Consecrated Beasts just frozen in place and unable to hit me, because getting tossed around by them is probably one of the most unpleasant things I've experienced in Genshin. When it goes up against the third chamber, there is a problem here because the Kenkis are not freezable, which basically turns this into a mono-cryo team. I still need to use Kokomi's burst though, less this time for the Hydro application and more for the emergency healing and refreshing her skill. Anyway, it's really good that Shenhe is on this team now that it's sort of a mono-cryo team instead, since not only is she buffing Ayaka, but herself and Kazuha's cryo-infused damage too. Despite survival being quite a challenge in this chamber, the freeze team still manages to clear it in a good time. Another second half team that I want to show you is one that's been left behind by the Denjo meta, but still has the tools and AoE to accomplish this half quite well. Now, full disclaimer that this Itto is C3 and Albedo is C2, so this is a hyper-invested Geo team.
Everyone on me!
The Fungus Wave took a bit of effort because I didn't crowd control them at the start, so I kind of had to chase them down one by one. Albedo's Elevator kind of got in the way of my Itto combo there, so I awkwardly had to get rid of the remaining fungi, just using a combination of skills and whatnot.
Come into being!
With the Kairagi group, once I collected them all in one area, I used Zhongli's burst to crowd control them and keep them there. It's a bit more crucial to get the crowd control right in this wave of Kairagi because you're avoiding killing one too soon so that the other doesn't regenerate its HP.
I've hit the berry!
This Kairagi almost did, and honestly, I think that it's good RNG that it was still doing its attack animation when its partner died, so it took a while to get into the HP regenerating animation.
This is order! Come into being! Feel this ancient power! Everyone on me! Oh, coming through! Attaboy! I will have order! Gather! Let's roll!
Towards the end here, I am trying to avoid spending their bursts unnecessarily, and just using their skills to kill this remaining Consecrated Beasts, because I want the energy to be up full in the next chamber. This team is very comfortable. I mean, we have Zhongli, who is, of course, a very thick shielder. Itto and Albedo's AoE attacks are also very good against these multi-target mobs. I swear the satisfaction that comes with playing Itto in his strongest teams, for me, it just never goes away.
But we'll meet again.
I won't show the entire third chamber anymore because Itto's team shreds through them as much as you would predict. The only noticeable thing is that because of the cryo floor, Itto's movements and attacks get slower and it gets a bit sluggish feeling. But he still shreds through them with ease in terms of damage. For my final showcase, I've got my pride and joy, my beautiful, handsome, amazing, glorious C4 Alhaitham in his Quick Bloom team. This has Alhaitham, Yelan, Kuki, and Nahida. This Quick Bloom team allows Alhaitham to show off his spread damage while still getting some Hyperbloom damage through Yelan and Kuki, and Nahida steal her own damage and buff Alhaitham with that extra EM. Alhaitham is shredding through these enemies pretty fast, and he does so with the rest of the chambers, so I will just leave you with this montage of this beautiful man and give him his own theme music to fight to. Needless to say that my Alhaitham team is my favorite team to clear Abyss with. After trying out all these teams, especially with the 5 stars, I found that my runs were generally about 40 to 60 seconds faster compared to my 4-star clear in my original Abyss guide. Those were for chambers 2 and 3 though. For chamber 1, it was on average about 15 to 20 seconds faster, and with that, I really think that chamber 1 posed the most challenges, has the most RNG, and is relatively more painful to get through regardless of your team. Anyway, that's going to be all for this video. Let me know down in the comments what teams you used for this Spiral Abyss cycle. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!